Stellarons. The subject shrouded in mystery, sprinkled into every plot we've had so far, yet something we know next to nothing about. The very thing shoved inside of our Trailblazers' chest that makes us so special and makes our potential limitless. We know this happened for a purpose, but what is this purpose? What could Elio have cooked up for us in his quest to save the universe from Nanook? We know at some point that we will have to fight against this Aeon of Destruction, that much is obvious, but how we will get there is the question. The very question that I attempt to answer today. Because we just simply collect the power of different paths just like Genshin's Traveler collects elements, but we aren't ever told exactly how or why. And this is a mystery I believe is the key to the best kept secret in the entire game, yet right in front of us from the very beginning. Because this is the Trailblazers' true power revealed. Okay, so to start things off, we gotta understand exactly what a stellaron is. A stellaron, nicknamed the Cancers of all worlds by the IPC, are known for spreading across the universe and dooming a world by destroying their ecosystems and civilizations, while spawning fragmentum, a corrosive type of crystal-like substance that spawns fragmentum monsters and pretty much corrupts whatever it touches. But this ain't about the fragmentum. Even though the stellaron is known as a seed of disaster, this thing is not exactly that simple. Because according to Madame Herta, this quote-unquote object is alive, and they have a special ability that allows them to tether themselves to a certain Aeon's path, and it responds to the desires of the world it falls on. The only problem being the way it responds is extreme and ends up destroying the world in the process. Kinda like how Yaoshi responded to the Shanzhou's desire for immortality, and then they got the Ambrosial Arbor, but now they gotta deal with Amara, and how the Borisin and the Foxians of Verdantia wanted food, so Yaoshi blessed their lands but destroyed their planet's ecosystem in the process, kinda like that. Which results in what is probably the most misunderstood, possibly emotionally unstable living object in the entire universe. So why would Kafka, or rather Elio, want this thing implanted inside of us? Well, I believe that everything we've seen so far is the key to answering this question. Let me explain. Because we've known what a stellaron does to an individual since the very beginning. We've seen what happened to Cocolia, we've seen how it played on her emotions and manipulated her into nearly ruining what was left of Eurilo 6. And considering how stellarons tether to paths, this one appears to have tethered to the preservation, for well, obvious reasons. The Antimatter Legion was wreaking havoc all over the planet, the IPC left them to die, and Igor couldn't get anyone to help. So in response to the fervent cries to Qlipoth for the world to be preserved, the Stellaron responded with the Eternal Freeze, saving the world as a blessing, but also a curse. Defeating the Antimatter Legion's forces with ice, but also throwing this already ravaged planet into an ice age. So what is the difference between what happened here and what happened with our Trailblazer? Well, there is one key detail that we've swept under the rug. You see, when the Stellaron was implanted into us, we had no initial bias, no knowledge of who we were or what path we followed, and no desires, so the Stellaron remained relatively dormant. And I believe this is a huge and very much intentional detail, because unlike Eurilo 6, we were a blank slate, and the Stellaron's nature to respond to desires wasn't activated in the same intense way. Notice, it is Kafka that handles the Stellaron, the person known for lacking the sense of fear. Remember, the Stellaron caused the Eternal Freeze in response to the people of Eurilo 6 crying out in fear and desperation, so the response was mirrored in a manner that matched the people's intensity. Now, knowing this, what happens when the person placing the Stellaron has no sense of fear and places it into a receptacle void of all memories and biases? My guess would be a much more mild and controlled response. Because it did fuse to a path, do not get me wrong, but it wasn't extreme in the slightest. It was so subtle that we missed it this entire time. Because the Stellaron in fact tethered itself with the finality, or rather, the desire related to the finality. hear me out. It was placed by stellaron hunters who follow the path of finality into another stellaron hunter. But the emotions and desires it ended up responding to were of someone who, 1, doesn't take reality seriously in the slightest, 2, the woman who can't feel fear and doesn't believe her actions matter, and 3, someone who has no clue who they are and what is happening. So to mirror this comparatively weak sense of desire, the stellaron replied with a response of relative dormancy, until we took the blast from the Doomsday Beast, to which the stellaron speaks to us for the first time, saying, you must reach the end of your story, in your own way, which is a very finality way of speaking. Quick cut in here from Editing Nova, I forgot to mention that the stellaron is also showing us events that haven't happened yet. We haven't met Himiko, we haven't met Bronya or Sela. At this point in the story, these events haven't happened yet. And knowing the future and knowing how your different choices will affect the future is literally how the finality works, because Terminus travels backwards in time. He knows what's going to happen. So this is even stronger evidence of the stellaron copying the power of finality first. Okay, back to the video. Since Elio's entire role is picking and choosing the right routes to reach the end of the story in his own way, and since it says in your own way, this could reveal the fact that the stellaron will not commit to a certain path. It will pick and choose paths as we do. And this is why Elio wanted us to go with the Trailblazers, because each world we go to is influenced by a different path, and along our journey we are sure to come in contact with every single one. This is also why they led a small force of Antimatter Legion enemies to the space station. It wasn't just a distraction, this was a double entendre type of deal, because there is no world run by the destruction. Obviously, because the world would be destroyed otherwise, so that would be near impossible to get otherwise. But Nova, how are we going to get the Nihility path then? Well, there are many ways to traverse the void and different layers of the Nihility that are very much survivable. Acheron shows us this. But the destruction are literally the bad guys that kill everything they come in contact with. So I'm pretty sure Elio chose the right way to do this here. But back to the stellaron. Because in its goal of allowing us to reach the end of the story in our own way, it tends to find ways of keeping us alive in order to do so. Because we've died at least 2 or 3 times by now, and each time the stellaron has saved us by binding to the path associated with that world. We get blasted by the Doomsday Beast, we get destruction. We get stabbed by Kokolia's preservation path energy Ice Lance, we get preservation. We die in the world of memories, we live on as a memory. Us coming in contact with different paths allows the stellaron to tether itself to new powers, and by doing this, it collects them and swaps between them as we see fit. You see, we don't see any other stellaron swapping paths because they don't travel to other worlds. But since the stellaron is inside of us, it only responds to our specific wishes. And it wasn't volatile because at the time it was planted, no strong desires were present to cause the terraforming instability we see on other planets, which makes our stellaron in particular much more stable. Because every time a stellaron caused major damage, there is an underlying pattern to it. That being the desire it responded to was extreme or very strong. The Oak family, being the extremists they are, wanted everyone to follow the harmony, so they tried to make the stellaron brainwash everyone with the harmony song. Sanctus Medicus, being the terrorists that they are, smuggled the stellaron onto the Shanjo for obvious abundance cult reasons, and Lushaka, the homeworld of the Watchmaker, is an ocean planet because an aqua sprite got hold of a stellaron and she had previously lost her home to land dwellers, so she flooded the world as revenge. All of these examples stem from the same pattern of extreme desires causing planetary catastrophes, or at least risking them. But our case was the opposite. There was a weak desire. There is a reason why Elio sent Silverwolf and Kafka instead of Blade or Firefly. Those two are way too passionate to be anywhere near a raw, unstable stellaron. Because with the stellaron's comparatively weak response, it makes our state much more stable and controllable than that of Urilo 6. That said, it still very much wants us alive. We're in a symbiotic relationship at this point. It's inside of us. Unlike Akolia, her stellaron was outside of her. The only concern being, does the power power of the stellaron depend on the mental state of the Trailblazer. Because as we keep getting thrown into more and more intense situations, we seem to be getting stronger. And additionally, this could explain why we haven't unlocked the hunt path yet. Hear me out. Because the hunt path is one of vengeance. The Shanzhou wants revenge on the Abundance for the Mara, and the Galaxy Rangers are all hunting down those that hurt them. And Lan the Hunt wanders endlessly between worlds to destroy the undead beings that once poisoned their home world. Very revenge-centered path. So if the pattern holds up, we're probably going to be on a Shanzhou flagship and someone is really going to tick us off. Which would not only give us access to the hunt path, but also make our stellaron much stronger. And what if I told you that this is precisely how we have a shot at defeating Nanook? Because as our passion brims and new paths are unlocked for us, our stellaron is getting stronger and stronger, and attracting the gaze of the Aeons is only making this much more powerful. And with such a strong connection to each path, it is possible that we will become an emanator of multiple paths at once, because Aeons naturally choose emanators that, well, emanate their path's philosophy. We know this from Acheron, Herta, and Dr. Primitive, and even Fantilia. So it is very possible that in the distant future, our stellaron grows strong enough and tethers itself to paths so strongly that we get blessed by the Aeons themselves, or we are able to draw on emanator levels of power even as a path strider. Because remember, the stellaron is a living thing, which suggests that it develops as we do. This could very much be a peek into what the end game holds for our Trailblazer, and how we will defeat Nanook in the end. I mean, heck, Acheron wants to take down IX, and she's only an emanator of one path, so it's not really that unheard of. So in conclusion, it is still far too early to confirm anything, but I am seeing a major pattern of how our stellaron works and why it was placed into us in the first place. Meaning that the stellaron isn't a seed of disaster, but a seed of destiny. And I do believe that this is the Trailblazer's true power revealed. Admittedly, I am still really unsure about a lot of things regarding the stellaron, and I will definitely need to refine this theory in the future. Just take this as food for thought for now, because we will definitely be revisiting this later. I just can't help but wonder why it is that our stellaron is so much different than the others. It has to be because of the way it was placed in the circumstances, right? Ours is so calm, and Kokolia's was basically the demon voices in her head. Our stellaron is actively giving us control, and Kokolia's was telling her to give in. They are living things, they could have their own personalities, but that just sounds too simple, especially for Honkai Star Rail. Nothing in this game is simple. But what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.